Kia ora, this is a video about how valuations are done, or at least the basics of the principle of valuations for properties. And I'm using toys, and the teddy bears represent normal residential property that comes under the Property Act, and the reindeer one here represents Māori land. I've chosen to use the reindeer because it's a Christmas toy which comes around only once every 12 months, whereas the others, teddy bears, you can buy teddy bears pretty much all around the year. So that's a very similar scenario to Māori land. Teddy bears, you can buy them or they sell and you have sales evidence all year round, whereas reindeer Christmas toys is only available once every 12 months, same as Māori land. There are fewer sales of Māori land around, and so that's what makes it harder to value. So here goes. These are our teddy bears. Okay, so I've got 3 characteristics. To be honest, when it comes to property, there are more than that. There's more characteristics than that. You also have legal characteristics. You have planning characteristics, restrictions with the council. But just to keep it simple, I'm using these 3 attributes, which are size, age, and materials, similar to what you would do for a house. So we're going to assume that size, bigger overall house is probably worth more if all other things are equal. Age, modern houses may get a higher price than an older house. And then materials, let's say a knitted one like this lovely one, even though it's older, a knitted teddy bear might be worth more, or people, not worth more, but people might pay more for a knitted teddy bear than say the equivalent or bigger but modern teddy bear like this one. Okay, so let's imagine these fluffy ones represent weatherboard houses, and then this knitted one represents a brick house. Okay, so we've got that sorted. Let's move on to the next picture. So basically, when you're being asked to value a property, you are told, or you're asked to, let's say we're asked to value this one here, this little guy here. How much is he? And imagine it's a house. The bank or someone will say, how much is this house? And you go, I don't know yet. But you go and look at the evidence. So those are actual properties that have actually sold and changed ownership. So it's all settled. The money's changed hands. And you have a look at how much they sold for. This guy here is bigger and it's sold for $200. This one here is smaller and it's older, but remember it's made of knitted materials, or if it's a house, brick. Okay, and this one here is smaller. It's way smaller, so it should be way less than this one. It isn't, but that's because size is and price isn't necessarily directly, it's not linear. A house is a house. It gets to a point where it's so small, but it's still a house, so there'll still be a minimum amount that people will pay, whether it's this size or the next size up. Okay, so here's our teddies. How much is brown teddy bear? Okay, so after going through everything, like I said, we've got 150 for little one there, 185 for the premium material but older teddy bear, and we've got 200. Okay, so I've already cheated and put the brown teddy bear in between these two because I think that size matters. We're assessing for size. So we know then that step 1 here, okay, is that it's more than 185, but it's because it's larger, but it's less than 200 because it's smaller than this one, right? So we've narrowed it down to a range of $185 to $200. Now, step number 2, you say, well, how do we determine where it fits within that range? And you go, well, it's up because it's modern. So we know that it's higher because it's modern, more modern than this old one. But we also know that because it's not knitted, it's not necessarily considered to be as good a material as this one. So that perhaps those kind of even each other out, being modern but not knitted, but that's still probably being modern and bigger will still make it worth more than 185. So I'm going to say it's higher than 185, but it is lower than 200 because it is definitely smaller, but it's made of similar materials. Okay, so for me, that narrows it down to, let's say, it's less than 200, so it's 195 to 190, or 190 to 195. So that's narrowed it down. Oh, sorry, no, I reckoned it was less than 200 by quite a bit, and so I've put on it 190, and I think that it could be equal to or a little bit better than the 185. So I've got my range here is 185 to 190 for Mr. Brown Teddy Bear. So I've had to think about it, and I am going to say yes, because we're, in a way, we never know for certain, but we are having, when you're valuing a property or a product, taonga like this, you're saying, I am being asked to say how much it will be worth, and I know it's worth a range, and I can't be exact, but that's our job, is to give a single figure number. So I'm going to say, yes, it could be 185 or higher, but it's definitely less than 200, but I'm going to settle on 190, and I've talked you through the rationale of it, and so I can justify with evidence, and all of these teddy bears and their sale prices are evidence, and so therefore I'm going to adopt $190 for the value of the brown teddy bear. So imagine if this brown teddy bear was a house and $190 was $190,000. That essentially is the basics of how we value a property. Now I'm going to introduce you to this guy. He's Mr. Lemon, and as you can see, he's completely outside of the range. He's not even similar to, and we can say the lemon represents commercial property or industrial property, or it might represent like a hotel or something like that. So as you can see, Mr. Lemon is way too different to all the rest of these guys, which are residential properties. He's so different that comparing him to the other toys is not going to be useful for being able to establish how much these properties are worth if we're being able to do that. So in valuation, we don't mix types of properties. You don't go and use compare and say, well, Mr. Lemon sold for $400 and he's on the same street as this guy, and so therefore this guy must be worth $400. Well, no, totally different ballpark, whānau. We don't do that. So we keep the brown ones, the little fluffy teddy bears, we compare them to each other, and we take yellow properties like commercial and industrial and we compare them to each other. Okay, so like goes with like. So next we're going to move on to how do we value Māori land? This kind of land that only gets sold once every now and then, just like the Christmas toy only comes around once every 12 months. How do we value these properties? And I think that it'll be best if I do that in the next slide. So if you've made it to the end of this video, kia ora, you've done so well because it's a very long one. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about the actual valuation of Māori land in my next little video. Keep an eye out for that one.